I left the divorce papers by the fancy French press my wife had to have but never used. She goes, "You're abandoning me." I said, "No, you did. The second you laughed at your stepmom mocking me at our wedding." When I first saw her, she was standing under a cluster of track lights, studying a painting of what looked like a collapsing diner. She wore this navy coat with gold buttons and had her dark hair pinned up like she'd walked out of a Paris fashion blog. Everything about her said, upper tier. I almost didn't say anything. Almost. My name's Jack. I'm 31 years old, live in Pittsburgh, and at the time, I was doing IT work for a public school system. Nothing fancy. I was there because my buddy Mason had invited me to his gallery opening, not because I knew the first thing about abstract art. But then I noticed the tiny enamel pin on her lapel, a Silver Surfer pin, and that was it. You a Marvel fan? Or just like the surfer aesthetic? I asked, already bracing for the brush off. She turned and gave me this look, half curious, half amused, then said, "If I have to explain why Galactus is the best villain ever written, you're probably not worth talking to." I swear to God, I almost proposed on the spot. We stood there for 20 minutes arguing about the golden age of comics versus the movie universe. When she said she loved old-school horror comics too, I knew we had something. Before she left, she handed me her phone. "Put your number in. I might call you. Or I might just ghost you and make you wonder what you did wrong." Her name was Zoe. A week later, she invited me to an art auction. Not really my scene, but I was already in deep. The event was at this swanky downtown venue with walls made of glass and waiters and tuxes serving weird appetizers on slate. That's where I met her stepmother, Helene. Helene was polite, sure, but in that rich people way where the insults are gift-wrapped. She asked me where I'd gone to school, then nodded like she already knew it was an Ivy League. When I said I worked in tech, she tilted her head and said, "Oh, how practical." Then came the killer line. "Zoe's always had expensive taste. I do hope you can keep up." I laughed it off. What else could I do? But the words stuck. I felt like a garage band at a symphony. Later, Zoe shrugged and said, "Helene's just protective. I had a rough childhood. She's always in overdrive." I nodded. But in my gut, I already knew that wasn't protection. That was a warning. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for the world Zoe came from, or if she really wanted me in it. 6 months later, Zoe moved in. At first, it felt like the honeymoon phase was stretching on forever. We'd cook dinner together, binge old episodes of The Twilight Zone, and spend lazy Sundays digging through old comic shops. Her laugh still lit up the room. But slowly, bit by bit, her stuff started replacing mine. The record player I bought in college? Pushed to the closet. My second-hand couch, yeah, the one with the broken leg I'd fixed with a stack of textbooks, replaced with a white leather sectional she said fit the aesthetic. Even my dishes disappeared, replaced with plates so thin I was scared to touch them. Zoe still kept her place, a loft in Shadyside, said it was just in case. I didn't push it, though it stung more than I let on. Who moves in with someone but keeps a backup plan? Then came the renovations. It started with her suggesting we repaint the living room. "This yellow gives me hives," she joked. I agreed. But that turned into swapping the curtains, upgrading to brass fixtures, redoing the cabinets, and ripping out the carpet to install bamboo floors. And the kicker? Every time I hesitated or mentioned the cost, she'd brush it off with a kiss and say, "It's our future, baby. Don't you want us to have something beautiful?" My savings started to bleed. I didn't even realize how fast it was going until my debit card got declined at the grocery store. I started eating lunch at my desk to save money. Meanwhile, Zoe was talking about turning the second bedroom into a creative space for her art studio. That meant more money, paint, easels, lighting. One night, I walked into the living room and overheard her on the phone with Helene. "No, I haven't told him," she said. "He doesn't notice half of what I do around here anyway. I just rerouted the contractor's invoice to my business account. It'll look like a gallery expense." I didn't say anything, just stood in the hallway, half holding a bag of takeout, heart thudding. That's when it hit me. I wasn't building a life with her. I was financing her vision board. A week later, I found out Helene had loaned Zoe the startup capital for her dream gallery. Quietly. No fanfare. Just two women playing Monopoly while I was scraping together enough to fix the dryer. I asked Zoe why she didn't tell me. She smiled and said, "I didn't want to stress you out." I looked around at the apartment that no longer looked like mine and felt something sink in my chest. Stress? No, Zoe. You didn't want me to realize I was the one footing the bill for a life I didn't even recognize anymore. I proposed in the park where we had our first real date. It wasn't anything flashy, just Zoe, me, and the old stone bench near the duck pond. I had this simple silver ring with a tiny emerald in the middle. Not expensive, but thoughtful. She'd once told me emeralds reminded her of her grandmother. When I got down on one knee, she stared at me for a long second. No tears, no shrieking. Just a slow, almost surprised smile. "Yes," she said, slipping the ring on. "Of course yes. That night, she posted a photo of the ring with the caption, "He gets me." I really thought we were starting fresh, that the worst of it was behind us. But then came the wedding. It was held at this vineyard 2 hours outside the city. Zoe's idea, naturally. Helene handled most of the planning, which should have been a red flag. I just kept writing checks and telling myself this was normal, that it was what love looked like. The ceremony was fine, short, beautiful. Zoe looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine, while I just hoped my rented tux didn't wrinkle. Then came the reception. Helene tapped her champagne glass halfway through dinner, standing with a practiced smile. She held the microphone like she'd been waiting years for this. "I just want to say how delighted I am to welcome Jack into our family," she began, her voice sweet as frosting. "It's such a relief to know Zoe found someone who tries his best." People chuckled. "She's always been ambitious, our Zoe," Helene continued. "She dreams big. And Jack, well, he brings a certain groundedness, a practical kind of love. Isn't that right, Jack?" More chuckles. My ears burned. "But who knows," she said with a wink. "Maybe one day he'll grow into the kind of man who can really help her dreams come true." The room laughed. I didn't. I looked at Zoe. She was smiling, actually laughing. I waited for her to speak up, to shut it down, to at least glance at me with an "I'm sorry" in her eyes. But she just clinked her glass against Helene's and said, "You always know how to put things, don't you?" I didn't say a word. I sat there, smiling like a fool with a champagne flute I hadn't touched. My stomach twisted. My hands itched. But I said nothing. Because what do you do when your brand new wife joins in mocking you at your own wedding? You sit, you smile, you swallow it, and you start wondering what the hell you just married into. Paris was supposed to fix everything. That's what I told myself, at least. The wedding had left a bitter taste, but I figured maybe the honeymoon would be a reset. New city, new start. Paris in the fall. How could it not be romantic? We stayed in this boutique hotel in Le Marais. Cobblestone streets, coffee shops that looked like they were stolen from postcards, balconies with flower boxes. Zoe took 1,000 pictures. Of her outfits, of the food, of the view. Everything carefully curated for her Instagram. "Use the portrait mode," she'd say, handing me her phone without looking up. "Make sure the background blurs." She smiled constantly, for the camera. But at night, in the room, she was cold, distant, scrolling through her phone in bed, more interested in filters than in me. On the third night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and saw the bathroom light leaking out from under the door. I heard her whispering, muffled, but not soft enough. I got closer. I shouldn't have listened, but I did. "No, he still has no clue," she was saying. "It's kind of impressive, really. He just believes everything." There was a pause. I know. But if we can get that last transfer through before the gallery opens, we're set. After that, who knows? Maybe I'll trade up." She laughed. I backed away from the door, heart pounding so loud I thought she might hear it. I sat on the edge of the bed until the light turned off, and she crawled back under the covers without a word. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I did something I'd never done before. I checked her phone. I didn't want to. I hated myself for it. But I had to know. And what I found was worse than I imagined. There were texts with Helene. Long ones. About me. About money. About which accounts Zoe had access to and which ones she needed me to authorize. Screenshots of emails from lawyers. Hers, not mine. Asking about prenups and asset division laws in Pennsylvania. There was even a list titled Post-Divorce Goals. Underneath. Gallery launch. Find serious investor. Lease in NYC or LA. Sell Jack's condo. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I emailed the screenshots to myself, wiped her phone's recent activity, and put it back exactly how I found it. When she came out of the bathroom, she kissed me on the cheek and asked if I wanted to go to a cafe with good lighting. I said yes. I smiled. I acted normal. But inside, something had changed. Something had snapped clean in two. I realized I was being used, not loved, not valued, just used. I was a wallet in a hoodie, an ATM with feelings. But I wasn't going to explode. I wasn't going to confront her just yet. No. I was going to play the part, gather everything, watch quietly. And when the time came, I'd be the one with the plan. I called Ben the day we got back from Paris. Ben's an old friend, one of the good ones. We went to high school together. He became a contractor. I became a guy who got in over his head with a woman who saw me as a bank account. Life happens. Still thinking about building that place on your family land? Ben asked after I filled him in on the basics. I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. Just enough. Yeah, I said. It's time. The land was a couple acres outside of Latrobe. Nothing fancy. My uncle left it to me when he passed. I'd always meant to build something on it, a modest 2-bedroom place, nothing flashy. Just quiet and mine. Back then, I thought maybe Zoe and I would live there one day. But now? This wasn't about building a home. It was about taking something back. We got to work right away. I met Ben every evening after work and every weekend morning. We laid the foundation, poured concrete, framed the skeleton. Piece by piece, wall by wall, the place started taking shape. I didn't tell Zoe anything. At home, I played dumb. I let her talk about future houses and realtors and mortgage strategies while I nodded and sipped my coffee. She'd scroll through Zillow on her iPad, bookmarking $500,000 homes with wine cellars and spa bathrooms. "You like this one?" she asked one night, holding up the screen. "It's only $675,000, and the kitchen has imported marble." "Yeah," I said. "It's nice." Inside, I was counting nails and budget sheets. She thought I was saving for a dream house. I was really just saving myself. At the site, Ben dubbed it the Revenge House. We joked about it, but the name stuck. Not because I was out for blood, I wasn't, but because every brick, every shingle, every damn screw felt like a middle finger to the version of myself that thought being needed meant being loved. One night, while installing drywall, Ben looked over at me. "You ever gonna tell her?" he asked. "When it's done," I said, and not a minute sooner, because by then I'd have it all protected, deeded solely in my name. No ties, no strings, no loopholes. At home, Zoe asked why I was always so tired lately. I blamed it on work. She didn't question it. Why would she? I was still paying the bills, still showing up at art events, still pretending to be the loyal husband she thought she had wrapped around her finger. But something was different now. Each night at the land, I felt lighter. Like I was pouring all the weight she put on me into the concrete, the beams, the roof. I wasn't building a house. I was building an escape route, a quiet rebellion. And for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. The house was finished by early spring. Ben and I worked through snow, rain, and more than a few close calls with zoning permits, but it was done. 2 bedrooms, clean lines, solid wood floors. Nothing extravagant, just strong, simple, and mine. I waited another week before inviting Zoe and Helene. I told Zoe we had a surprise listing to check out, a potential starter home, just outside the city. I acted excited, told her I wanted her opinion. She was instantly suspicious. "A starter home in Latrobe?" she said, nose wrinkling. "Just humor me," I replied. "It's a good deal. Might be worth flipping." She called Helene, of course. Said she'd need her input too. Perfect. That Saturday, we drove out together. Zoe in the passenger seat, tapping through her emails. Helene followed in her Mercedes. When we pulled up to the lot, Zoe looked confused. "This can't be it," she said slowly. But it was. She stepped out, smoothing her coat as she stared at the structure. Her lips parted, just slightly. Helene stepped out of her car and made a noise like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Oh," Helene said. "It's charming." I smiled. "Want a tour?" Inside, the sunlight poured through the windows. The living room was open, warm. The kitchen gleamed. I could feel the silence stretching between them as I led the way. "This is small," Zoe finally said. "It's modest," I corrected. "But it's built well. Every inch of it." I watched them take it in. Watched Zoe's hand run along the countertop. Watched Helene eye the exposed beams like they personally offended her. Then I turned around. "I built this." Zoe blinked. "What?" "I bought the land 10 years ago," I said. "Always planned to build something here. Just took a while. You know, permits, labor, budget. But it's mine. Fully paid off. Titled only in my name." Helene's eyes narrowed. "So this is some kind of project?" "No," I said calmly. "This is protection." Zoe folded her arms. "From what?" "From you," I said. Silence. "I know about the phone calls," I continued. "The messages. The plan. The fake invoices. The gallery scheme. The prenup drafts. I know everything." Helene's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Zoe. Zoe stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "Jack," she started, "I think you're overreacting." "No," I cut in. "I've been underreacting for over a year." I pulled a folder from my jacket and laid it on the kitchen island. "This is a copy of the asset protections I've put in place. My retirement, my savings, this property, all separate. All untouchable." Helene stepped forward. "You can't just." "I already did." She flinched like I'd slapped her. I looked at Zoe. "I loved you. I really did. But you turned me into an investment. A stepping stone." Zoe's voice cracked. "So what now?" I stared at her. "Now? Now you don't get to touch this." I paused, then added, "And when I file for divorce next week, your lawyer's going to have a hell of a time finding anything worth taking." Helene glared. "You'll regret this." I smiled. "Already did." And with that, I walked past them, out onto the porch, breathing air that finally felt like mine. 3 days after the house reveal, I handed Zoe the divorce papers. I didn't announce it. No dramatic confrontation. Just set them on the kitchen table one morning before work. next to the French press she never used but insisted we buy. She walked in, hair still wrapped in a towel, and stared at the envelope like it might bite her. What's this? I didn't look up from tying my shoes. You already know. Silence. Then, in a voice that tried way too hard to sound calm, she asked, You're really doing this? I already did. I stood, grabbed my keys, and headed for the door. I almost made it, too. Jack, wait. I turned around. She looked shaken, not mascara running, teary-eyed shaken, but rattled, like someone whose world just cracked open and she didn't like the view. Can we just talk? Please. I stared at her. Talk about what, Zoe? The gallery I was supposed to unknowingly fund? The divorce plan you were already researching? That was Helene, she said quickly, stepping closer. You know how she is. She gets in my head. I wasn't really going to do any of it. You were already doing it, I said flatly. Zoe's voice dropped, softer now. Jack, can't we fix this? Start over? I'll cut Helene out. We can go to counseling. I shook my head. No, Zoe. This isn't about therapy. It's about trust. And we don't have it. Her eyes glossed over, and for a second, I saw something that looked like real pain. But I learned by now she was good at performing. She reached out, hand barely grazing my sleeve. You were the only good thing I had. Then you should have treated me like it. Her hand dropped. The next day, I packed up my things, or what was left of them. Most of the apartment had been reshaped into her vision of modern elegance, but my books, my camera gear, and a couple comic book boxes still lived in the closet untouched. She watched me from the couch, silent. I didn't say goodbye. As I closed the door, she said it, voice sharp and stinging. You're abandoning me. I paused, turned slowly. No. You abandoned me the day you laughed at your mother's wedding speech. She blinked. I added, You just didn't notice until I stopped paying for the show. Then I walked out. That night, I got 5 calls from unknown numbers. I ignored every one. The 6th came from her lawyer. She was fighting it, of course, wanting assets, a piece of the condo, claiming emotional investment. But I was ready. I had everything. Screenshots, emails, texts, financial records. This time, I wasn't playing catch-up. This time, I was in control. And I wasn't about to give that back. A month after I walked out, I moved into a small apartment across the river. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, hardwood floors that creaked when you turned too fast. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No brass fixtures, no curated furniture, no abstract art on the walls. Just space. Peace. I started working later hours, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Being busy felt good. It kept my mind from wandering back into places it didn't belong. I dusted off my old camera. Started taking weekend hikes again. Drove out to Ohio Pile, snapped photos of waterfalls, rusty bridges, quiet trails. No one was posing. No one was asking for a better angle. I breathed again. Ben came over one night with a 6-pack and some cheap wings. So, he said, cracking a beer. What's life like without a Paris-obsessed art critic haunting your wallet? I laughed. For real this time. It's quiet, I said. In a good way. The court date for the divorce came and went. Zoe brought a lawyer who looked like she expected to win just by walking in the room. Mine brought a stack of evidence and a calm smile. The judge saw everything for what it was. She didn't get a dime. The gallery folded 2 weeks later. Turns out, the investor Helene lined up bailed when Zoe couldn't prove she had any assets or a reliable source of funding. I didn't gloat. But I didn't feel bad either. I got a text from her the day after it closed. Zoe, I guess you got what you wanted. Me. No. I just stopped letting you take what you wanted. She never replied. A few weeks after that, I got an email from someone named Claire. Said she was an old friend of Zoe's. We'd met once at a dinner party, apparently. Claire. I saw what happened. I always suspected something was off. If you ever need someone to confirm anything in court, I'll testify. She used people. You weren't the only one. I didn't need a witness anymore. But it felt good. Like I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the failure. I was the guy who got out. Sometimes, I'd drive back to the house I built, the revenge house, as Ben still called it. I'd sit on the porch and listen to the wind in the trees. Think about how close I came to giving it all away. One day, maybe I'll move into it. Or maybe I'll keep it as a reminder that love isn't real when it comes with contracts, expectations, and a smile that only shows up when there's money on the table. For now, I'm just living, learning to trust myself again. And next time I see red flags, I won't be the guy brushing them off with a nervous laugh. I'll be the guy walking away before the first nail even goes in the wall.